Hey, what's up, guys? This is Grayson the Dean 221 Nichols, and I am here today to go over one of my favorite topics with you all. Today, we're going to jump into my three betting course. And first, I want to take a step back. I think there's a lot of confusion with three betting in some of the more mid stakes tournaments that I've seen a lot of my students run into. They find themselves getting caught in between ranges. And an example of that might be three betting with a hand like tens, ace, queen suited, and then not really knowing what to do when faced with reaction. So I think a good thing to do is take a step back, and we should look at our three bets for now as either for value or for a bluff. And if you are three betting and it doesn't really satiate one of those two camps, it's very likely not a good spot to be three betting. And you should probably be flatting or shoving or folding. Not really sure. We can get into that later. But I think the first thing to do, again, is separate for value or for a bluff. We want our three bets to fall into one of those two groups for the most part. Okay. The next thing I want to talk about is just kind of some common population tendencies. A lot of people who come to me as students seeking help, they end up being like $22 average buy-in player. They got like a 5K bankroll, playing mostly on Poker Stars, solid basis, good understanding. Maybe they've taken a master class, they've done some work with some solvers, and they're just not getting to the point where they want to be. And they're just like, why is this? Like, what's happening? Why am I not succeeding at these stakes? Like, I'm smarter and better than my opponents. I should be winning. Not necessarily true, because the problem is you're actually using a lot of the wrong resources, essentially. The information that you're gaining from these master classes or solvers just isn't really pertinent in under $33 buy-in tournaments, essentially, right? So you need to focus more on an exploitative process, right? And right off the bat, what I see with students who come to me, these average mid-stakes players, these smart guys, they tend to, in general, not three bet bluff enough, and then they tend to three bet for value with like their aces, kings, ace, king, etc. too much. And just think about that right off the bat. Like, that seems contrary, right? Like, if you don't three bet bluff very often, and then you suddenly three bet only with aces, when you three bet, it looks like you have the goods. So that's not a good thing, right? Even when we don't have to be balanced in an exploitative nature, it's still not a good thing to be that predictable. So what that tells me is that we need to work with students right off the bat and making them three bet bluff more and learn where to flat their monsters instead of just essentially three betting every time you have aces, kings, right? So the first thing you need to do is you have to assess your competition, right? It is a wildly different game, whether you are up against a recreational player, fun player, whatever you want to call them, or a pro, like a good regular, right? We will approach these spots completely differently, right? And the thing I want you to remember is I say the two P's. That's what I tell myself, right? So against good, solid, skilled regulars, I want you to approach your three bet bluffs with perception in mind, okay? What we are looking for is a spot where the regular, who we can predict their thinking, because we're a smart, good mid-stakes player, we understand this game, we can kind of predict what good players, even better ones than us, are somewhat thinking, right? So the idea is, what is the perception of this good player of me? How can I manipulate my three bet to make this good player think that I have the nuts, that I'm really strong? So perception is what I'm focusing on when I'm three bet bluffing against a good player. Now, against a more recreational player, I'm going to be focused on playability, the other P, right? And what I mean by playability is, with the rec players, I don't expect them to fold as often as a regular because they're not as stack size savvy or nuanced, right? Probably more used to live poker where you flat three bets a lot more often as well. So my thinking would be that your playability is focused around your position, stack sizes, game flow, and perceived ranges, right? And I would say that a good rule of thumb in these spots is take the hands that are at the bottom end of your flatting range, move them over to your three bet bluff range when you're against a recreational player. I think it will probably be beneficial. Maybe take a hand like king 10 suited, queen 10 suited, king jack off, ace 10 off, the hands that are at the bottom end of what you would flat with, move them over to your 3-bet bluff range. That will probably benefit you just by taking the initiative in these spots, right? So right off the bat, that's how I approach 3-bet bluffing when it comes to the two different camps. And in general, I think in poker, a lot of the time we'll look at it as regular or rec player. There's going to be different routes from that, but I think starting with those two base ideas will be good for us. So, like I said, when it comes to 3-bet bluffing, perception against the regular, playability against the rec player. Now, when it comes to 3-betting for value, it's going to be kind of similar. I think we all know 3-betting for value is a little bit easier than 3-bet bluffing, right? You're 3-betting for value, you just know you have the goods. But I think what people mess up with is they 3-bet a little bit too often for value, right? As we mentioned earlier. And what I might mean by that is like the type of people who they'll have ace king and they just 3-bet without even thinking why they're 3-betting. What is their intention? What are they trying to accomplish with the 3-bet? How do you stand up against a 4-bet, right? These are all questions that should pop into your head before you 3-bet with a hand like ace king. It shouldn't just be automatic, right? So I really encourage you to be mindful of what you're trying to accomplish. You might have a hand like tens or ace king and you're like, oh, I got a 3-bet. This guy's aggressive. But if you can't stand up to the pressure of a 4-bet, then you made a bad 3-bet in the first place, right? So really kind of focus on like, what is your intention? What are you trying to accomplish before you go ahead and 3-bet? And something we'll talk about often in these courses is be ranging your opponents constantly. Like this is the essence of the game. The better you know what they have, the more aware you are of what they think you have, the easier it's going to be to manipulate these people and convince them to do things that are favorable for you, right? So back to the 3-betting. We talked about 3-bet bluffing, again, perception, playability. 3-betting or for value, it's going to be a mix between flatting or 3-betting with your hands. And an approach I came up with that kind of helps you guys figure out how to tackle these spots, I call it the top-down approach. And so essentially what you have is the top of your range, you 3-bet for value. Your aces, your kings, your queens, your jacks, ace, king. Then the stuff under that, you flat for value. Ace, queen, ace, jack suited, ace, 10 suited, king, queen suited, 7s, 8s, 9s, 10s, etc. Then the stuff under that, you 3-bet bluff. And just a good little rule of thumb for you guys, you'll never 3-bet with deuces through 6s. There's just no reason ever to do it. Once in a blue moon, and it would only be because stack sizes may be called for it, but I honestly don't see a reason to ever do it. So you might 3-bet shove with those hands. You'll never do a non-all-in 3-bet with deuces through 6s. So just remember that. So what I mean by the range below our flatting range would be stuff like maybe ace 10 off, ace 9 suited, king jack off, king 10 suited, jack 9 suited, jack 10 off, etc. Those hands you can move to your 3-bet bluff range, essentially, right? So I think the issue here is that a lot of people mess up and they don't look at it as like top range 3-bet for value, middle range flat for value, bottom range 3-bet bluff. They kind of just do this like linear thing where they just like do the same all the way across because they're just like, oh, I'm in position. I have a playable hand. Let's 3-bet, right? I think a lot of times that will work and the aggression and the initiative will help us most of the time. But there are certain hands that deserve to be played a particular way. Like they gain equity from seeing the flop, right? Whether it's like a king, queen suited or maybe a small pair trying to hit a set against multiple people. But again, back to what I said before, intention. Always think about that, right? Lastly, when it comes to 3-betting for value, another thing I want to mention is that perception still comes into play, right? Let me give you an example. If under the gun opens to 2x and you're sitting under the gun +1 with aces, if you 3-bet in this spot, regardless of what stack sizes are around the table, you are telling the table a story. You are saying, hey, the way I see it is I don't think you would ever be perceived as bluffing. So back to that P word, right? I would even go so far as to ask myself a question in this spot and say, can I be perceived as bluffing here? And if the answer is no, I don't think I'm going to 3-bet for value with aces, kings, queens, ace, king, etc. Because my point is that like if you 3-bet in this spot and they don't think you can bluff, then that means that you only have value. So right off the bat, whatever under the gun has, he knows what you have. He knows you have aces, kings, queens, jacks, ace, king. That's it. Maybe ace, queen, tens. And I think no matter how good your hand is, I think giving away the strength of your hand is not going to be a beneficial thing for you. So again, I would ask the question, can I be perceived as bluffing if I was contemplating 3-betting with a monster? And if the answer is no, I'm not going to 3-bet. I'm going to flat or shove. And in the instance I just described to you, regardless of stack sizes, that's a spot where I'd flat aces and I'd slow play. And I'd hope someone squeezes behind us or does something, right? Sometimes you're in difficult spots post-flop. As a result of this, there's definitely an inherent risk to it, but you're also going to get into some pretty sweet spots as well. So I think, again, I want you, when you're thinking of 3-betting for value, aces, kings, queens, jacks, ace, king, what have you, say to yourself, can I be perceived as bluffing? And if the answer is no, do not 3-bet. And if you can't 3-bet, it's either a flat or a shove. So like, let's give that example. Say the blinds are 501K. Guy under the gun has 35 blinds, opens to 2,200. You're under the gun +1 with aces. I would say, can I be perceived as bluffing here if I raise to 6,500? I don't think so, unless you guys have an insanely inherent dynamic between the two of you that would call for you to 3-bet bluff from under the gun versus under the gun 1, then the answer would be no. So I would not 3-bet. And obviously shoving would be crazy to shove for 35 blinds effective from under the gun +1 with aces. Therefore, the only option available to us by deductive reason is calling. So I would just call with aces there. I would probably end up calling with a lot of my value range there, to be honest. Kings and queens, I might do it hoping to get action from people behind me. Tens and jacks, I might do it because I'm not even happy facing a 4-bet from anyone at the table. So again, intention. Think why you're 3-betting. What are you trying to do? Don't be a robot. Don't just be like, I have ace king, I must 3-bet. I have jacks, I must 3-bet. Don't do it like that. Take a second, ask yourself why you're 3-betting before you do it. Okay, so those are the basics, kind of. Next, what we're going to do in the next video is we're going to dive into how to specifically handle 3-betting against regulars versus 3-betting against rec players. We're going to do examples for each of them that we kind of touched on tonight. But yeah, I'm really excited to get to the next video. Hope you guys enjoy it. Have a good day, everyone. See ya.